Alright, here we are together again. A little bit more on the election here. It's remained fairly stable. Here, electoralvote.com. Senate looks like it's tied still. Nationally, Harris still looks like a slight lead in the Electoral College, and most polls showing a modest lead in the popular vote count. Interesting polls here. Bottom. Alaska, like I say, it's always kind of leaned Republican, but it's hard to state to poll because it's such a rural area, so many scattered areas. California, solidly Democratic. Florida, North Carolina, so those results are about as close as they can be. A few separation of a few points in both states. Texas is proved to be a lot closer than it usually is this time of year. Seeing poll results about 3, 4, 5 points separating the candidates at this point. That's very unusual. It's this close. Senate races, California should be easy hold for the Democrats. Adam Schiff, a congressman, with a 20-point lead over former Major League Baseball pitcher Steve Garvey. It's polled out at the University of Southern California. Actually, Senate races in Florida and Texas very close. These are within the margin of error. Our Congresswoman Debbie McCarcel Powell, 44%. Rick Scott, current senator, former governor, 47%. That's very, very close in that state. And that's surprised a lot of people. Ted Cruz, incumbent senator, he's long been very popular in Texas, but because Texas has such a strong built-in Republican vote, he's been able to skate by for a while. But extremely close race here with Congressman Colin Allred. A couple of polls showed Allred ahead. This one's showing just a 1-point difference. That's basically coming down to turnout. I'm going to show you a neat little tool here. This is the University of Florida here, their election lab, their political science department. And they're tracking early voting across the country. People are voting already. Election day is here, even though the official election day is November 5th. A lot of people have already voted. Now, they do have their disclaimers here. Of course, all good scholars have to have a disclaimer here. So nationally and by states, they have the breakdown available. But here's what they've got. States where people are voting early so far. Darker green, the more votes coming in. This is where early voting is taking place so far. But so far, as of October 1st, 649,000 votes have been cast. In-person votes, about 250,000, 258,000. As people have gone in, they can vote in person early. Mail-in ballots returned, 369,000. But mail ballots requested, 45.5 million. So a lot of ballots are in the mail going to voters, and a lot of them are on their way back already. So this number can increase over time. Now this time, like I said, there's not going to be as many mail-in votes as there was in the last election because there's no COVID epidemic this time. That spiked in the 2020 elections and coming down, but most votes we can expect from the general trends are going to be cast before Election Day. And this is what they've got here. Who's voting so far? Well, by party registration, 107. Again, this is total voting. Just we have voter registration. 107,000 Democrats to 39,000 Republicans. None in minors. Those people belong to minor parties or independents, and that can kind of swing it away. These numbers are pretty consistent with what happened in the 2020 election, because voters, they have their certain voting behavior. Some are election day voters. They're always going to be election day voters. That's for a particular type of individual. I'm not saying good or bad about it, I'm just saying it's who they are. A lot of people, they vote early. Those are different kinds of voters. And generally, Democrats vote early. Republicans generally vote in person on election day. So it's giving us some interesting numbers here, but can we interpret anything? Can we look in the crystal ball and see what's going to happen the election night? No, we really can't. It's just interesting to look at. It's political scientists, they love numbers, they love data. Vote by age. Again, this is just a handful of states that have that information available. Generally, most people voting early between the ages of 41 and 65. Generally, people over 65. People over 65, they always vote in very large numbers because it's just what they've always done. It's a habit. It's part of the generation they're from, how they're raised, was the importance of civic involvement in the vote. Over many years, they've recognized the importance of election results, while their vote is important. And a lot of communities, voting, it's a social activity. The senior citizens, they generally tend to vote in larger numbers. We're seeing that here. And a lot of senior citizens vote early because, well, they just can't get around as well. They may be traveling, may be sick, just may not be able to physically leave their homes, so they vote early. So that's total vote by age. Vote by gender. So just about tied. Generally, women outvote men in elections, but this is about even. Like I said, we have an unknown total here. We just wasn't clear for the voter information. Again, this is just from a handful of states: Colorado, Georgia, Idaho, Michigan, and North Carolina. So it's hard to extrapolate any kind of national trend from this. But over time, though, these numbers will change quite rapidly. You can see here from this tab here, in person early. They don't have that information. Mail ballots, just from a handful of states here. But so far, percent of ballots requested and ballots returned, only about 0.5%. See it returned by age. Not a lot of useful information here. Generally more senior citizens voting early. See, vote by race. Non-Hispanic whites so far. Again, this is just from the information we have from Georgia, North Carolina, and South Carolina. Hispanic population, white population, because generally African Americans tend to vote on election day, or closer to election day. Again, there are a lot of exceptions, but again, not a lot we can tell about the election so far because it's still 5 weeks away. Okay.
supervisor are you?
University of Florida. It's the lab. It is University of Florida. It is election.lab.ufl.edu/early vote/ University of Florida in Gainesville, led by Dr. Michael McDonald, who is a professor of political science there. And they did this last year too. But again, they don't have a lot of data yet. It's just a curiosity at this point for people who just like watching numbers. But at this point, there's really nothing you can really kind of glean from this so far. It looks a lot like the 2020 election, but again, how these people particularly voted, we really don't know. All we know is a lot of them are registered Democrats, a lot of them are registered Republicans, a lot are independents. But we don't know how those votes are swinging. Just won't know until election night, until they're actually counted. Anyway, that's what's all kind of shaking up here. What's that? Yeah, mine was showing problems earlier too. I think the Wi-Fi was a little messed up. When I was hooking this up to the laptop, it was telling me that it couldn't get to an internet signal. But this is a wired system here. This computer I'm using over here, so makes the problem with the router. Well, moving right along here, we have been talking about the Bill of Rights. And I say it's important we kind of go through the Constitution, kind of see what it's about, and everything, what all's in it, because this all affects how our government operates. In turn, it affects us. Bill of Rights, of course, first 10 amendments of the United States Constitution, ratified in 1791. Okay, I've been discussing the First Amendment last time. Our First Amendment emphasize that point, 5 specific freedoms. Freedom of speech, freedom of religion, freedom of the press, freedom of assembly, freedom of petition. All important to our ability to express ourselves on governmental and non-governmental issues. It lets us be ourselves in many ways. As like we kept emphasizing the point here, the structure of governments is you have the freedom to pretty much say and do whatever you want, so long as you don't hurt anyone else. But the price for that is, there's a price for this. Other people get to live the way they want to as well. You have the right to speak your mind. Someone else has the right to speak theirs. It may not be something you want to hear, but that is what freedom is about. As long as they're not threatening anyone or not defaming anyone, they can pretty much say whatever they want. Because even with libel, as we discussed, that is not a criminal offense. It is in some countries, but not here. What it is a civil matter. that is a dispute between individuals. And so the New York Times versus Sullivan case tells us you have to prove it was something was knowingly false and with actual malice. It is the express intent to ruin someone's reputation or freedom of press and freedom of speech. Now, one issue we didn't quite finish up on last time was an issue concerning freedom of religion. It's religious faiths or something very personal, and many of us take very seriously, and some people are very defensive about them. That's okay. You feel what you want to feel about your own faith. This country, you get to explore these questions for yourself. But again, that's the idea of separation of church and state. That is, the state must be neutral on religious questions. It cannot endorse a specific religion, cannot ask you to prove any kind of religious questions. There's no religious tests. You don't have to donate and give your money to any particular church. But one big question has come up over the years: prayer in school. Some people want students to have time to pray in school. That should be enforced. Well, there's a Supreme Court case goes along with that called Engel versus Vitale, 1962. This was a case in New York. In the 1950s, the state of New York passed a law requiring that a prayer must be recited in public schools every day. Regardless of your religion, you will pray in school, as required by the state of New York. Because middle of the Cold War, the concern was communist Soviet Russia, who had shut down all their churches. They're going to come to the United States to do the same thing. So we need to. The thinking was we need to defend our faith and show we're going to actively and publicly practice it. So the state of New York actually wrote a prayer the students were to recite in school. Well, one family in New York got upset by this and took it to court. Went all the way to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court ruled that that was unconstitutional. That's a decision that's often commonly misunderstood. You've got to make sure we're clear about it. The Supreme Court said in the case Engel versus Vitale was the state cannot make you recite a prayer. The state cannot say when you will pray, what you say when you pray, or who you pray to. That is an establishment of religion. So while students can pray, they can pray anytime they want, the state cannot force you to. The state cannot say, you're going to pray right now. The state cannot do that. That is an establishment of religion. Now, having been a professor for all these years, I can tell you, yes, on test days, a lot of students get religion. But that is your decision to practice that as you see fit. As long as it's not disruptive, you can believe what you want to believe, pray to whoever you want to pray to, whenever you want to. But as a state employee, I cannot say, you pray right now. I say, you will write an essay defending my religious beliefs, or you will fail the course. I cannot do that. state cannot tell you when to pray. But you can do that if you want to, or not. It's your choice. That's the thing about the First Amendment, individual choice. When and how you express any religious belief you have, for or against. So when people try to say prayer was taken out of schools, it wasn't. Students always had the right to pray if they wanted to. But teachers and the state, they cannot say you have to. Because we kind of touched on this point before, is you may be okay with a particular expression of religion if that's a religion you agree with. But one day the state of Arkansas says, okay, we're going to have a high black mass in class every day and sacrifice a goat to Satan. That's not going to go over well with a lot of people. But it goes back to the principle of freedom of religion. The state cannot make you pray to anything or anyone or say any particular thing. That's up to you, not up to me. No more than I can tell you who to marry or who to be friends with. I can't tell you what your relationship with God should be. It's for you to decide. That's part of the First Amendment. Second Amendment. Guns. Well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Now, what all that means has been controversial. Is it a collective right? Is it an individual right? Is it a right for a state to establish a state militia or a national guard? Like I say, it's been kind of in question. But a well-regulated militia means not just anything. Because you got to remember, there are reasonable limitations on all of these. But how far does the Second Amendment go? That's gone back and forth. Because when the Second Amendment is ratified, one, you don't have a very large United States Army. The federal government relied on the state militias to rise up and defend the nation while a large national army is being put together. And they just got out of a revolution where they had to fight a war for their independence. So the states wanted to make sure they can still do that. But also, you don't have professional police forces yet. You have a county sheriff, you have a constable, a few local officials, but nothing like what we know today. Nothing like, say, the city of Chicago or New York, we have thousands of police officers working for the city. So the question, how do you maintain order? How do you protect yourself? Second Amendment, do you have the right to defend yourself? Yes. But how far does that go? You have the right to own a gun. Okay, what kind of gun? Remember 1791? What you have in terms of guns are single-shot pistols and single-shot flintlock muskets. Basically, you have to reload it after every round. You're not very accurate. The revolver is not going to be invented until the 1830s. So, they don't have a lot of guns around yet, but normally they are used and simply used for hunting or and the state militia. But weapons technology changed over time. Machine guns, by the come along the early 1900s, they'd never seen those when the Bill of Rights was being ratified. I can fire 100 rounds a minute, something they would have had no thinking of. Or piercing bullets. And again, by arms, are you just referring to guns? Does an individual have the right to own a howitzer? Big 20-inch deck gun from a battleship? Do we have the right to own nuclear weapons? And does that mean there's absolutely no restriction on it? You tell me. These are questions we're trying to deal with, is because there are thousands and thousands of people who die from gunfire every year in the United States. People who subautomatic and automatic machine guns, they gun down a school or a church or a grocery store, and a lot of people die on the spot. Others who survive, they have lifelong injuries, scars, physical, emotional trauma, those problems they never really recover from. Let's say you just take, just a typical 44 Magnum or Colt 45. A gun like that can do a lot of damage. So does this mean no licensing can be required at all? These questions they're still trying to deal with. Because with everything, there are limits. Right, the freedom of assembly versus the right to peaceably assemble. You can't get a group of people together and start a riot. That's a limitation of freedom of speech. Freedom of speech, you can't threaten anyone. There's limitations on that. You can't sell pornographic materials to children. That was a necessary restriction on freedom of speech. Similarly, are there restrictions on the Second Amendment that have to be put in place? I don't know. You tell me. In some countries, you do have to, you're required by law to unload your gun and store ammunition and the gun separately from each other, or lock up your gun when you're not using it. Swiss Army, for example, everyone in the Swiss Army, they have a gun they take home with them, but they have to store it properly because that's their training and requirement by the regulation by the Swiss Army. And also there are psychological requirements in the Swiss Army. They're not giving a gun to just anybody. A lot of some federal laws have attempted to have waiting periods, a 3, 5, 7 day waiting period to try before you can purchase a particular type of gun. You can make the purchase there on day 1, day 5 you can pick it up or have it delivered to you, whatever. Can guns be sent through the mail? No. But through somebody like UPS or Federal Express, yeah. In Japan, you're allowed to have guns and rifles in your home, but you have to go through a very lengthy process. 1, you have to make an application to the police department. 2, the police do a background check, and they interview you. Like I say, in some states here in the United States, if you're a felon, you can't have a gun. But some people are even challenging that. But in Japan, you have a police record, you cannot have a gun. You also have to undergo a physical exam, make sure you're physically healthy. You have to make sure your vision is in good shape. Correctable glasses. You have to undergo a psychological exam, make sure you are mentally sound. And then you have to make sure any guns you have, the gun is locked away, unloaded, ammunition stored separately, and the police have the right to come in and investigate this every so often. So why do people have guns in Japan? Well, the same reason anybody else does. Shooting clubs, hunting, home defense, but it's a very orderly society. They don't let just anybody have a gun. Is there still violence in Japan? Yes. But do they have school shootings in Japan? No. Canadians, they own guns as much in as large numbers as we do per capita. But they have licensing requirements. They have background checks. They're not going to let anybody have one. But a lot of people do, especially out in the more rural areas. They have school shootings in Canada? No. They have school shootings in England? A lot of people own guns in England. Do they have them there? No. No. They have stabbing, but no shootings. I can survive a stabbing. I can outrun a knife, but I can't outrun an AK-47. The only country in the world where mass school shootings happen on a regular basis, pretty much every day, the United States of America. Very sad. We have a lot going for us, but we have a lot of violence in this country. Even though violent crime rates are falling, it's still a very significant problem. There's something about our country where just a lot of people seem to think that violence is the only solution to anything. That your only solution to any problem, including somebody breaking in and threatening to steal your stack of $5 Walmart DVDs, is lethal force. That if someone insults you or steals your girlfriend or something, your only response is lethal force, and it just doesn't work like that. Or even just you're picked on at school. Some people suggested mandatory insurance requirements. That is, you have to pay insurance against any injury, any crime committed with that gun. Actually, no state's passed anything like that, but it's been kicked around a little bit. Because insurance companies would require very specific requirements for owning a gun. But another side of it, gun violence, not just what people do to others with their guns, but what they do to themselves. We have an extremely high suicide rate in this country. And the top way people commit suicide, guns. And even then, there's the accident rates. People clean a gun, they don't realize it's unloaded, shoot themselves. Little kid gets their parents' gun, decide they're going to play cops and robbers with each other. Guess what happens? 4-year-old Junior shoots 3-year-old Johnny. And that's happened a lot. There's a story at a grocery store, it's like a couple years ago. This little kid, about 2 years old, was riding his grocery cart as his mom went grocery shopping. Purse was right there next to him. His mom was a concealed carryover. Had a gun in her purse. What happens? 2-year-old kid grabs the gun, starts playing with it, shoots and kills his mom. Well, that gun sure kept that family safe, didn't it? What is the answer? What is clear is there are a lot of problems here. There's a lot of people who aren't all there psychologically. A lot of people who don't know how to handle these weapons. A lot of people with very violent tendencies. A lot of people lack self-control. What is the answer to that? And are there any, what does the Constitution say we can do about it? I don't know. That's one of the things why we vote in elections. One of the things why we have a court system, so we can hash out these questions and decide what are the limits we have. How do we balance the values, again, of freedom, order, and equality? How do we balance those out? And how do we keep our people safe? Not just from outsiders, but also from ourselves. So that's the Second Amendment. Very controversial. Certainly going to be a lot more debates made over this now and in the future. And what the ultimate answer is, I don't know. The ultimate constitutional answer is, I don't know. It's kind of flux right now. Third Amendment. Second Amendment is a right to bear arms. Third Amendment is no quartering of soldiers in private homes. No soldier shall in time of peace be quartered in any house without consent of the owner, nor in time of war, but in a manner be prescribed by law. It's not a big issue because the United States military makes sure that, the men and women in uniform, they have a safe and comfortable place to sleep at night. Base housing allowances, VA loans, people can buy their own home. In the barracks, got multiple options. But this is, though, it's a reaction to the American Revolution. Parliament passed 2 laws in the years leading up to the American Revolution requiring the colonists to provide shelter for British Army troops in the colonies, even on private property. Particularly the Quartering Act of 1774 specifically spelled out that, yes, British Army troops could sleep in private homes if they wanted to. They could go up to your house, knock on your door, and say, guess what, we're sleeping here tonight. We're sleeping here tonight. Next to your daughter. Yeah, you can see where this is going. A lot of people were upset. So they made that a priority here in the Third Amendment. No quartering of soldiers. Now there's an exception to that. If he owns the place, yeah, he gets to sleep there tonight, but just knock on any random door, no, he just can't just show up and say, I'm sleeping here. Third Amendment. This is an interesting one here. The right to be secure in your person, houses, and papers and effects. In other words, search warrants and such. Again, this also goes back to the years before the American Revolution. British customs inspector or any British official get what they call a writ of assistance, which gave them the power to go anywhere they wanted to search for anything. Private homes, private ships, private businesses, wherever. And as long as they say, I'm just searching for this thing, they can go wherever they wanted to. That caused a lot of people to get really upset, especially on the coast, leading to the increased tensions between the colonists and the British. Here's some specific wording. The right of the people to be secure of their persons, houses, papers, and effects against unreasonable searches and seizures shall not be violated. No warrant shall issue but upon probable cause, or by oath or affirmation, and particularly describing the place to be searched and the persons or things to be seized. That is, search warrants. They have to be specific. And if you're going to be searched, you have to have probable cause or reasonable suspicion. New York City, for a while, is very notorious for this, called the stop and frisk policy by the New York City Police Department. Basically, people walking down the street, police officers would order them to stop in order for them to be searched. For another reason, they decided they can be searched, stopped, and frisked. That was declared unconstitutional. Because just walking down the street is not a crime. And the thing is, the way that was enforced, it was usually people of a very specific ethnic group who were stopped and frisked. So, cops suspect somebody's got something. Want to search them for, they're involved in some crime. They want to put a wiretap on their phone. They have to get a search warrant. Because they have to go to a judge, explain what they're doing, and the judge gives an order. But it's always a very specific order. What you're looking for and what location. Because suppose they barge into the place, they got the search warrant. They catch the guy red-handed. Well, there have been a lot of cases where there was an error on the search warrant. Wrong address, a typo on it. And what happened because of that? Guy's released. Charges dropped. Fourth Amendment. Got to be very specific. You don't get a room for error. You don't get a do-over. So our system of government is established on the principle of innocent until proven guilty. Innocent until proven guilty. It is the state's job to prove guilt. It is not the job of the accused to prove their innocence. It is the job of the state to prove guilt. Because coming from a system like we did under the British and all the abuses the American colonists suffered in the years before the Revolution, we decided we wanted a system where it's better that a guilty man go free than an innocent man be convicted. Don't want the innocent punished. Now, does that still happen anyway? Yes, it does. It's a horrible thing. They try to fix it, but it still happens sometimes. But the overall principle of our judicial system, though, is the state has to prove guilt. That's, of course, led to a lot of other interesting questions as well. You got a search warrant, you go into a place, and you see like say, you're looking for documents for embezzlement or something, or something someone stole, like a jewelry or something. But you walk into their apartment or their house, wherever, you see right in the middle of all this, where you're looking for the stolen jewelry or these documents, whatever, you see this giant meth lab living room. Even though you weren't looking for a meth lab, can you still arrest them on the meth lab? Yes. Something called the candy dish rule. That is, you're looking for something specific. You're empowered to do that under the terms of your search warrant. But if something is out in the open, you just happen to see, without digging through looking for it, like say something in a candy dish, then yes, that is reasonable to arrest them on that. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you see a stolen TV set. You can't put a stolen TV inside a candy dish. This can be out there in the open. But that also mean that you get to tear the man's house apart looking for stolen jewelry or a secret passage where they might have these secret documents and stolen money or stolen TV sets? No, you can't. It has to be out in the open. They right to be securing your persons, which means your private records. Can anybody access those? No. Your bank account information, that is your personal property. You don't have to share that with anyone. You have to give that to the police anytime unless they have a search warrant for it. Particularly health records. That's protected by law. Uh, they cannot just give out your health care records to anybody. You have to sign a waiver for that, or they have to be upfront and say, by doing business with us, we sort of right share your records with A, B, and C. Maybe then they have to be very narrow and very specific about it. They can't just hand those out to anybody. I'll give you another example. Case in the news a couple days ago. The Veterans Administration learned that an employee had access to the records of the two vice presidential candidates, Tim Walz and J.D. Vance. They are both veterans. They have their medical records at the VA. Well, someone accessed these records. Guess what? They didn't have permission to access these records. Even though it's on a computer system where anybody can access it, they would have had to have a specific reason to investigate that, such as Tim Walz and J.D. Vance got into a fist fight with each other. They showed up at the VA hospital to get patched up. That case, yeah, they could look it up. But just curious and looking at random, no. Those are private records. Even though they are public officials, those are private records. So what happened to that guy? He got canned. So, Fourth Amendment. And this has also been used to support the right to an abortion. It is what goes on in your own body, that's your own business. You become a parent or not, that's your own business. Um, some people are proposing to go so far as to, like they used to do in some communist countries, haul women down to the doctor every month to make sure they're not pregnant. They are pregnant, make sure that they don't get an abortion. That would have been a violation of the Fourth Amendment. A lot of states have imposed very strict restrictions on abortions in their states, but courts there have generally overturned those, like in Georgia and in North Dakota. It's unconstitutional, in violation of the Fourth Amendment, right to be secure in your person. That is, government authority only goes so far. Actually, one judge once brought up the scenario of somebody asking, "Don't I have the right to swing my arms in a free country?" The judge's famous reply was, "The right to swing your arms in a free country stops where the other guy's nose begins. Right to be secure in your person. I can swing my arms all I want as long as I don't hit you or you or you." Fifth Amendment. Now, there are several amendments proposed of the Bill of Rights. There's like 16, but they're combined down to 12. So some of these, you read them, looks like a whole bunch of things kind of put together. This is one of them. Fifth Amendment, a whole bunch of things, but they're all very important. Among other things, no person shall be held to answer for capital or otherwise infamous crime unless on presentment or indictment of a grand jury. A grand jury, that's kind of, well, down to something, it's kind of a practice jury. It's designed to stop persecution by an overzealous prosecutor. Some prosecutor gets an office size he doesn't like, he can't just keep filing charge after charge after charge against you, trying to see if he can nail something on you, just put you away. No, has to go through a grand jury first. Yes, felony charges. And like I say, the precise laws change from state to state, but generally felonies have to go through a grand jury first, unless they catch you right in the act. Sometimes it's just, say, they catch some guy in an armed robbery at Brookshire's, whatever. Yeah, it's a felony. They can arrest you and charge you that day. But in some cases, like, say, the Diddy case in New York, that was a very complicated case, a lot of evidence sifted through. He wasn't being caught in the act, but a lot of people are coming forward, and a lot of records say, yeah, we have reason to, as a reasonable suspicion that he committed this crime and these crimes, and therefore we're filing an indictment against him. Same thing with Trump being charged with election violations in Georgia. There's a whole bunch of felonies charged connected with that. That had to go through the grand jury. But with a regular jury, for a trial, it can be, the rules change from state to state, but basically, you're normally just called in for one case. 12 people on a jury. Or sometimes, like here in Arkansas, you're called in for jury duty. That is for a specific time. You're called in to be part of a big pool of jurors for, say, 4, 5, 6 months. You can be called up for part of that jury at any time. But a grand jury, generally, you're impounded for, say, 6 months or a year. And you can be subpoenaed for a jury either for the state level or the federal level. We had a professor here a couple of years ago. She was asked to be part of a federal grand jury in Fort Smith. And she had to do that for 6 months, go up every so often. And what they do in a grand jury is you don't hear the whole case. You just hear the prosecutor present his evidence. Does the defense attorney get to counter that? Yes. So his own evidence. Is it like a trial? No, but basically they just only have one question. Is there enough here to say you can reasonably proceed with the trial? Is the prosecutor being overzealous, or is there something to what he's saying? That's what a grand jury is. Got to make sure that not just any case is coming to court, but one with a reasonable suspicion. Except in big cases involving land or naval forces or the militia, or when in actual service in time of war or public danger. No double jeopardy. This does not have to do with Alex Trebek and available cash prizes. No double jeopardy. No person shall be subject to the same offense be twice put in jeopardy of life or limb. Now, that means is they can't indict you for the same crime twice. Here's what happens. You're in trial for capital murder. Judge finds you not guilty, slams down the gavel. Not guilty, case dismissed. You can't. You can jump up and scream, "I did it! I'm glad I did it." They can't prosecute you on that. They can never prosecute you again on that crime, capital murder.
People assume that OJ didn't do the thing. He could have just, after the trial, like, I did it. I did it.
Yeah. But there's a couple things with that, though.
Okay.
See, prosecutors have their little tricks. Because sometimes you commit a notorious act, you don't just break one law. Sometimes you break several laws. For example, 1962, there's this notorious case in Mississippi. 3 civil rights workers are kidnapped and murdered. Those were state charges. Because they're civil rights workers, all-white jury found not guilty. The state could not convict on. The state couldn't bring back any charges against them. But what happened? They know who did it, so they were arrested, tried, and convicted and sentenced on federal civil rights violation charges. They violated the people who murdered them. They violated the civil rights of these 3 men. So they're going to jail on that charge, not the state capital murder charge.
Is it much charge driven?
Yeah, it's charge driven. It's basically, whenever you're indicted, they say, you broke this specific law, and that's what you're being tried on. And that's what the case is going to defend on. Did I break that law or not? Is that law constitutional or not? So sometimes when there's a multiple murder case, they may only try the case on 1 or 2 murders. And 4 or 5 other murders committed, they're not being tried on. Because of things like this, because of the Fifth Amendment, no double jeopardy. Because suppose something goes wrong with the prosecution, technical problem, an error or something. There was a very notorious case in Texas back in the 1990s. This woman went nuts and killed her 2 kids. State prosecutors only prosecuted her on 1 murder charge on one of the 2 children. Well, sometime after she's tried and convicted, goes to jail, sentenced to jail for the rest of her life. Well, her lawyer finds a loophole and says, wait, the trial wasn't properly conducted. With this trial, the verdict should be vacated. Appeals court hears and says, yes, there was a significant problem with the way the case was handled. Case is dismissed. Does she leave jail? No, because there's still that other murder charge out. They charged her with that second murder, tried her again, convicted her again. No legal problems. She's still in jail and can sit there forever. Now, because of those things, yes, you can protect the public. Murderer does not necessarily have to go free. But an innocent man, they can't keep charging with the same crime over and over and over again until finally they get a conviction. Over and over and over again until finally they get that magic jury, that magic judge says, yeah, I guess he is guilty. Can't do that. Prosecutor gets 1 shot. That's it. So, in the case of O.J., could he have jumped up and said, I did it? He could have, but he still could possibly face other criminal charges. Violation of federal civil rights, assault, some other things. Plus, in some states, like California, you commit a crime, you can be held not only criminally responsible for it, but civilly responsible for it. So the families end up suing O.J. for millions of dollars. They didn't get any of it, but they end up suing him for it because of the laws regarding civil trials are different from criminal trials. Because it was a civil case and not a criminal case, they could still sue him for wrongful death. But no double jeopardy. This can't be charged over and over again for the same crime, for the same act. But let's say I rob one store, and then a few days later I rob another store, then a third store. crime in each case is burglary and breaking and entering. Now, does that mean I can only be charged once? Only for each specific act. I may break the same law on several different occasions, but that isn't being charged for the same incident. I get a couple speeding tickets. Technically, that's a misdemeanor. Now, cop pulls me over, I pay the fine. Does that mean I can never be charged with speeding again? No. I can't be charged with speeding in that one instance again because I already paid the ticket, already paid the fine. No double jeopardy. But if I'm caught speeding again by the same cop on the same highway on another day, yeah, I could be charged again. That's what double jeopardy is. But that one time I get caught and I pay that fine, no, I cannot be charged again with that. Okay. Clear? A lot of criminal cases are actually kind of slow and boring. The TV, it can be a compelling story. It's TV shows kind of time compress everything to put all the interesting parts all right there together. But a lot of criminal trials, you find jurors, even judges, falling asleep. I swear to God, one time I was watching this one trial, judge fell asleep. Now he was not disbarred or kicked off the bench. I have no idea. But that really did happen. So, parts of this here, designed to protect the rights of the accused. Grand jury. No double jeopardy. No self-incrimination. And here's what that means. No self-incrimination. That means you don't have to testify at your trial. Even if a police officer steps up and asks you questions, you don't have to answer. In fact, your lawyer, in a case like this, rather you not say a thing. Good defense lawyer say, you stay quiet, you let me do all the talking. I'll handle it all. You do not have to testify in your own defense at a trial. Fifth Amendment, no self-incrimination. Why? Because lawyers can be pretty slick. A good lawyer, a really good lawyer, gets you on a line of questions. They can set a trap for you. They can make you trip up over your own words. They badger you long enough, they can make you commit to things you never did. They make you admit to the assassination of Abraham Lincoln if they could. Good cross-examination, a good lawyer can do that. That's why your defense lawyer says, sit down and shut up. Let me do the talking. You can't talk your way out of it. So, the thing I remember about prosecuting attorneys is they see people who try to talk their way out of it all the time. They know exactly what to do, exactly what to say. They know how to handle that. And prosecutors are very good debaters. Lawyers in general are, especially trial lawyers. So for that reason, just because you could trip yourself up on your own words, because a slick prosecuting attorney could turn a misdemeanor jaywalking case into a death penalty murder case. Stay quiet. You don't have to defend yourself. That prosecutor, he has to explain why you're guilty. That's his job. You don't need to explain yourself at all. Your lawyer just needs to say, my client's not guilty because of this. This evidence is not valid, or he wasn't there, or this is unconstitutional, whatever it is. But your lawyer does all the talking. So even if you're taken into police custody, that's why they always say, you see it on TV shows, you have the right to remain silent. Fifth Amendment. You're being informed of your right that you don't have to answer any questions while in police custody. Even if you're not under arrest, you don't have to answer any question a police officer asks you. Now, does this mean police are wrong to ask? No, that's part of their job. They got to ask questions. Do you have to answer? No. Does it mean there's something wrong if they're asking you a question? No. They just could be asking your opinion on something. They could be working on a completely separate case and just asking for an expert opinion on something. They could be asking a witness something. Did you see this? Do you know this person? Not saying you did anything at all. But whether you committed an act or not, you don't have to answer the question. It's always better to cooperate with the police. Yes, but in those situations, I say, get a lawyer. Let them explain it to you. Let them take you to law school. Because even in cases where you're innocent, you can explain yourself very well. The emotional pressures of being on trial are too much for anybody. Even experienced defense lawyers can get tripped up. That's why I say even a lawyer who's on trial, he needs to get his own lawyer. They have that famous saying, an attorney defends himself as a fool for a client, because emotional tension and everything, they're things you're going to miss. They're things you're not going to say correctly. Some a little cool, detached, they can see the case from different angles. They can see what they need to do to get you acquitted. So no self-incrimination. So you see this on TV or in Senate hearings, say, I plead the fifth, or I decline to answer that question on the grounds that my answer may tend to incriminate me. Basically say, Fifth Amendment. Or saying, I'm exercising my rights under the Fifth Amendment not to answer that, the Constitution not to answer that question. Basically, Fifth Amendment, no self-incrimination. You don't have to answer a thing. You're subpoenaed by Congress and grand jury, or the district court in El Dorado, Arkansas. You don't have to answer any questions. No self-incrimination. I hope no one's ever in that kind of situation, but that is an important thing to remember here. But always get a lawyer. A lawyer friend of mine once said, and this is a really good point he made, everybody hates lawyers until they need one. Due process of law. That is, there must be a process. This goes all the way back to the Magna Carta in 1215. This goes back to English law. Due process. No one can be deprived of life, liberty, or property without due process of law. What does that mean? They can't just throw you in prison for no reason. They can't just execute you for no reason. They have to charge you with a crime. They have to go through the process of showing evidence. They have to go through the process of letting you defend yourself. That is due process. Go through the process of examining evidence, indictments, whole process of letting someone get the chance to defend themselves. It is due process. There are procedures designed to protect your rights, designed to protect everyone's rights. Last one here, it's really interesting here. Private property shall not be taken for public use without just compensation. That is, you have a piece of property the government needs, they have to pay you for it. Now, whether it's fair market value or not, if you think it's enough, well, that's another question, but they have to pay you for it. Give an example. I grew up in the Dallas suburbs. And one of my older brother's friends, his family just happened to own this little farm outside the city of Grapevine in the early 1970s. Well, around that time, they decided they're going to build a little airport there. Turns out to be Dallas-Fort Worth International Airport. Well, they just couldn't just pave over the guy's fields. They had to pay him for it. So what did they do? They talked over, gave him a huge amount of money. They bought a house in the suburbs, lived happily ever after. But they had to pay them for that. Fifth Amendment. Sometimes turned out very well for that. After Fifth Amendment.
Do the people have to move or?
They can have what they call eminent domain. Is if they keep refusing, the government has two choices. They can either leave it alone, change their plans, or they can go through the process of eminent domain, saying the state has compelling need for this particular property. We have to have this. Again, it depends on the state. But there are some cases, where they do force people to move, but they do pay people for what they lose in the process. But at the end of the eminent domain, yes, they still have to be compensated. I gave you a couple examples here. Before they built the conference center here, this guy owned this little shop here that was on that spot. And the city council kept trying to buy it, negotiate it. The guy said no, and more and more and more. And they eventually had to be court cases and everything over it. Eventually they settled it. They bought the property. They gave the guy money for it, and he moved. But Fifth Amendment, he had to be compensated for it. Or consider that highway extension down there along US 82 when here in Magnolia. They couldn't just pave the Department of Transportation highways couldn't just pave somebody's front yard and say, we need a 4-lane highway and your yard's in the way, so we're paving it. They had to pay them for that land. Some cases paid very nicely. Some cases maybe not so nicely, but they still had to be paid. Why? Fifth Amendment. Recognition that that is your property. And they can't just take it just because they think they have a better need for it. They have to go through a procedure, due process, and compensate them for their property, which is legally theirs. And that's the Fifth Amendment. Questions on that? All right, so we're running a little over again, but we're going to call it a day there. Continue on the rest of the Bill of Rights and go on to the other amendments after next time. Have a good day.